I'm Wendy Parsons. I'm the General Manager with the Leamington District Chamber of Commerce. We are a membership and sponsorship-based organization, and debates are just one of the events our chamber offers. Right now, we are in full force distributing the rapid screening test kits, and this is helping keep our community safe. Please reach out to us as we continue to help our business community. Before we start tonight, I would like to take a moment to reflect with the land acknowledgement. The Leamington District Chamber of Commerce respects the rich and vibrant culture of our Indigenous people. We wish to honor the original people of Turtle Island as we recognize their homelands as a sacred and spiritual place known since time immemorial. In the spirit of partnership and reconciliation, we acknowledge that our membership resides on a variety of territories and homelands. Please welcome to the stage to say a few words and introduce tonight's moderator, Chamber President Jen Dawson.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you to the Bank Theatre for offering their facilities for this important debate. Thank you also to all the volunteers who helped get you seated tonight. They did a wonderful job. I also want to thank the Board of Directors for the Chamber of Commerce, specifically Diane, who is here tonight helping you get registered. I also would like to thank John Barnett, past board member of the Chamber of Commerce, for being our timer tonight. By the way, this debate will be taped and made available on our website and social media. And we want to thank Quantum Sound Productions for producing this for us tonight. With less than 1 week to go, the parties are focusing on key issues as we, the voters, go to the polls for our final decision. So we thank you for coming here today and giving your free time to listen to our debaters tonight. So tonight's moderator, where's Corey, is past president of the Leamington District Chamber of Commerce and is the current president of the Bank Theatre. He has moderated the 2 previous municipal debates in Leamington and 2 previous provincial debates in our riding. The previous federal debate in our riding, as well as a federal and provincial debate in the Windsor-Tecumseh riding. That's a lot of work, Corey. Where is he? He is the former program director of CHYR-FM and was the 2020 recipient of the Leamington Chamber's Positive Professional of the Year Award. Please welcome Corey Robertson.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jen. Thank you very much, Wendy. Since the year I turned 18 years old, I've never missed the opportunity to cast my ballot in any federal, provincial, or municipal election. And I would like to acknowledge any veterans or family of veterans that are here tonight, and thank you for your service and sacrifice that has given us the freedom to do what we are about to do here tonight. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge each one of the 4 candidates for the courage of their convictions to stand for public office. I admire each and every one of you. I'd like to get 2 important thank yous out of the way before we get started. To the staff at the Chamber of Commerce, Wendy Parsons, your board, and your volunteers, thank you, as well as the amazing volunteer staff and the board of directors here at the Bank Theatre. Thank you all for your hard work in organizing and putting on this event for us this evening. Thank you, folks. The job of the moderator is not to provide any answers to any one particular person or group that may want or expect to hear. The job is to facilitate a meaningful and insightful discussion with questions designed to elicit thoughtful responses for you to weigh in the making of your voting decision. And so in the interest of time, I'm not able to answer every question that you may have submitted. If you didn't hear the answer you wanted, if I didn't ask a pointed question that is important to you, or as an individual or as a delegate of a group, if I've asked a question that you wanted to hear a different answer, I encourage you to reach out to the candidates through their proper public channels and ask them their stance. So we'll quickly review the rules and the regulations of the debate for this evening. We will start with opening presentations that each of the candidates have prepared. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to deliver their opening presentation to you. They will see a yellow card flashed from John Barnett when 30 seconds remains, and then they will see a red card when the full 3 minutes has expired, at which time there will be a stop. We'll then move into the question and answer period. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes or 90 seconds to answer the question. Each candidate will have the same amount of time to answer the question. We will rotate each question who answers first. And at 15 seconds remaining, the candidates will see the yellow card, and at the full 1.5, they will see the red card instructing them to stop. Finally, we will then move into the closing remarks. These are prepared statements. There are no rebuttals to the closing remarks. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes or 90 seconds to deliver their prepared closing remarks to you. And again, they will see the yellow card at 15 seconds to go and a red stop card at the full 1.5 minutes. Following the closing remarks section, I will have a few comments to give to you, the audience, in terms of proper exiting procedures due to COVID restrictions here inside the Bank Theatre. So we have a lot to get through to tonight. We drew numbers down below the stage before coming up, and we actually drew the numbers in the order that the candidates are seated. It works out that way sometimes. So to introduce to you each of our 4 candidates tonight, our Conservative candidate is the incumbent, and it is Dave Epp. Then we have, representing the Green Party, is Mark Vercouteren. Our NDP candidate is Dan Gelinas. And the Liberal candidate is Greg Hetherington. We'll now begin with our opening presentations. Each candidate has 3 minutes. Mr. Epp, you have the floor.
Good evening, and thanks, Corey, and thanks to the Chamber for hosting this debate. While we've been in a minority parliament for almost 2 years, there's been no successful non-confidence vote. Most Canadians actually aren't happy that we're here tonight debating. We're now in the 4th wave of a pandemic, in the worst economic situation since the Great Depression, and in a worse situation than the global recession of 2007-2008. Instead of addressing these issues, Justin Trudeau is making a grab for power. So this election is not based on necessity, but on opportunism, while we should be focused on opportunity for Canadians. Locally, the Wheatley, Leamington community is the community that I was born into, that I've raised my family in, where I've operated my business. The counties of Essex and Chatham-Kent are the communities in which I played many years of fastball, and the 2 counties that I represented for over 2 decades in the ag business community. I know these communities. And so it's been my privilege to work on issues that affect so many of us, such as connectivity for Pelee Island and broadband generally. Now working on a private members bill or regulatory changes to provide Pelee Island with a remote community designation that will help with so many of their infrastructure and transportation needs. Chaired a local task force with all 3 levels of government across party lines when COVID intersected this community and our international guest workers. That affected us all. Working with the local healthcare providers, medical agencies, industry, and across party lines, we were able to get federal attention, at first to reopening the border to these vital workers, then to address regulatory reforms and issues that affect future success. Discussions have already begun with policy folks regarding the $3 billion commitment in Canada's recovery plan, which has the potential to address shoreline needs here and in Erie Shores. The recently published Agricultural Processing Capacity Study highlights the needs for a grosser code of conduct to bring fairness to our food value chain. And we need to do more to add value to the abundant raw product that we grow here locally by adding processing and remanufacturing capacity in Canada. And we need further investments in local infrastructure to sustain a rapidly expanding greenhouse industry. Most recently, with the explosion in Wheatley, a federal and provincial legislative and regulatory review is absolutely necessary as we explore why the federal government left Ontario out with the Orphan Well program. And certainly we will continue to review emergency funding programs and options to address immediate and longer-term infrastructure needs for the Wheatley core. while we locally feel the rising cost of everything through inflation as it becomes more and more apparent, this is a national program, a national problem. As Conservatives, we have a plan, Canada's recovery plan, and it's based on 5 pillars, and you'll hear more as we go through the evening. Conservatives got us out of the global recession of 2007, 2008, to lead the G7, and we can safely do it again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Epp. Mr. Vercouteren? Mr. Vercouteren, the floor is yours.
My name is Mark Vercouteren, the Green Party candidate for the Chatham-Kent-Leamington riding. And I'm running once again because I truly believe that the Green Party's policies are the policy that is best for our riding and Canadians. And the fact of the matter is that we shouldn't be here, should we? We should be having a government that's dealing with the present crisis, the climate crisis, continue ongoing, the COVID crisis, the housing crisis, and recently the refugee crisis from Afghanistan. Instead, what we have is a PM who just wants to play politics and decide he thinks he can win another election, which is turning out to be incorrect. It is time for change, real change. And you know you're not just going to get that with the Conservatives. What we need is we need our government to focus on building an economy that can deal with not only the present crisis, but with future crisis. And what I've been seeing is for the past few months, we have started the process of building the green economy we need to deal with the climate crisis. And with affordable high-speed internet, we're dealing with the problems that we've been facing when developing the plan that allows us to have charging stations, to stop building the pipelines, and to convert our gas and to put our gas sector into the renewable job-creating energy, into the job-creating renewable energy sector. We can start the process to build a sustainable economy. We can not only deal with such crisis and be prepared for future crisis, it will be an economy for us, our future, our children, our grandchildren. And the government should be focused on doing that, not on what it takes just to win the next election. And that's why I'm running in to be your Green MP for the Chatham-Kent-Leamington riding. It's where I grew up, it's where it's home, and where I want to see its future. Canada is a great country, and we can be so much greater.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vercouteren. Mr. Gelinas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello, Leamington. All of us are very happy to be here to be able to speak to you. My name is Dan Gelinas, and I was born in Windsor, but I've lived in Wheatley the last 27 years. I've been involved in politics since my high school days, and I got into trouble talking over the teacher, and so he gave me an assignment to write on any political party in Canada. Well, that hooked me, and I've been with politics ever since. I've been very active in community, like everyone else on this stage. We've all done our fair share, and hopefully we can do more. Back in 2009, I had a heart attack, and they brought me into the hospital. Then it was Leamington Hospital, now it's Erie Shores. The nurses and doctors there saved my life. In an effort to help pay back for what they did for me, I started making commercials for the hospital as fundraisers. They had a full spread in the Leamington paper on me, asking people to donate. So you know how I feel about our hospital and all hospitals. If you can help your hospital, please be there. I've also been working with my good friend Cody Cooper's up there in the corner and the Canadian Federation of Pensioners. And something that hasn't been brought up here, but there's the fact that if a company goes bankrupt in this community or anywhere across Canada, we get messed up on our pensions. So we're trying to make workers and people who, part of the companies, if they go bankrupt, get money first before anyone else. So it's a protection policy, and frontline, when companies go bankrupt, let's get a chance to get some of our hard-earned money that we put into all those years. So we have a lot at stake in this election. To steal a line from Mr. Reagan, are you better off today than you were 6 years ago? Take a look at what's happened to the economy in this country, what's happened because of COVID, and the promises that were made to us by the Conservatives and Liberals all these years. the promises they never kept. We had been better off if they had brought in pharmacare like they talked about in 2016. And when the chance was there, back in February this year, to get pharmacare passed in the House of Commons, every Liberal except 2 and every Conservative voted against pharmacare. Pharmacare is something that we are entitled to. You know, it's something that we've worked hard for, and as a Canadian, we should be able to have everything covered from head to toe. You got to stop and think about what's going on in the last, we can go back 20 years. Who's better off, the average worker or is it the big companies? I mean, why do we spend $2 billion a year in subsidy to the oil companies and we're paying $1.39 for gas? You got to look at what's going on here, guys. And I tell you, it hurts.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. Great to see you all here with us as we address some very serious issues and also look at what's happening right here in your own backyard. We as Canadians, and right here in Chatham-Kent-Leamington, are at a pivotal point in our community and for our country. Our government set forth a plan at the beginning of the pandemic to keep you safe and help you survive the pandemic, and we've done that. We became a world leader in acquiring vaccines, yet every time we came forward with how we were going to help Canadians, the Conservative Party fought us, saying we're doing it wrong. I think we're doing it right. Although my counterpart says the election is unnecessary, 3 times as your MP, he voted in a non-confidence vote to shut down the government and force an election. This election, you have a chance to elect a government with a plan to keep us safe, keep us moving forward. We need to open up the economy. That we can all agree on. We need to get back to work. And we need the Canada we all know and love. I was born on a farm and learned a strong work ethic while working on the farm with my family. I learned compassion for my neighbors and community. And now I'm a small business owner. I've spent the last 35 years helping our riding when it needed it, helping community groups, schools, churches, schools, small businesses. Wherever I could help, I tried to lend a hand. We need to continue that. We need to have someone who will step up and assist in a time of need. Local leadership matters. Let's look at the case of our MPP, a progressive Conservative who didn't show leadership, and now our riding has seen the biggest increase in COVID-19 in the entire province. Local leadership matters. And I'm tired of hearing politicians make promises that they can't keep. I will make promises that I can keep. When I was on the hospital board for 20 years, they said we need new equipment. And I spearheaded a campaign that raised $7 million to put better equipment in our hospitals. When our children of our community needed help, the Children's Treatment Center reached out and said, we need to raise money for better equipment and better services for our children. I stepped up, and my wife and I helped raise $3 million over 10 years to help the Children's Treatment Center. I don't say this to impress you, but to impress upon you that I can get things done in this community. We need an MP that shows up, helps every town and community in the riding, not just the ones that they live in. This election is important. It gives you a chance to make a local change in your representative, someone who will step up, show up, and speak up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hetherington. Folks, we'll now move into the question and answer period. I thank those of you that did send in questions, and I thank the debate committee for assisting on the questions as well. So, as I mentioned at the start, we drew numbers as to who would answer the first question first, and it works out that it'll be the same order that we just heard the opening statements. And so, let's get right into it. We're going to start with what's on everybody's mind, and it's the pandemic, and it's COVID-19. The first question goes to you first, Mr. Epp. Canadians have suffered during this year-and-a-half-long pandemic. Residents of the Chatham-Kent-Leamington riding have suffered great personal loss. Small business has suffered during the pandemic, with many nearing the point of closing. What can we expect from your party when it comes to financial assistance, federally regulated vaccine passports, and any potential mandatory double vaccination policies in the workplace?
In 90 seconds?
Set a record.
Sure.
Well, first of all, I'm fully vaccinated. I encourage everyone to get vaccinated who medically can. For those that choose not to, rapid testing should serve to protect the public interest and public health to access goods and services. So there's the policy on that that's consistent with the Conservative Party. Regarding a pandemic recovery, we've announced a job surge plan where 25 to 50% of new hires, we have to get a change in philosophy. We actually have to start incenting employers to hire rather than pay people to stay home. So a job surge plan where 25 to 50% of the salary of new hires will be supported after the CEWS runs out, and that goes on for 6 months. Small business, SEBA-like loans, it's our Main Street business loan with $200,000 capped, equal to 4 months of pre-pandemic income, with up to $50,000 or 25% forgivable. Workers, we're going to double the apprenticeship job creation tax credits. For Main Street, we're going to put a $25% tax credit for people investing $100,000 into the Main Street. We're going to double the workers' benefit. So people taking their jobs, it'll work out to almost $1 an hour raise for them just on your income tax. So when you start to work, instead of $1,400 a year worker benefit, you'll be getting up to $2,800. We're going to incent the economy to hire. We've got to get our growth rates up over 3% as opposed to the 1.6% GDP growth that we had going into the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Epp. Mr. Vercouteren.
Well, I'm also fully vaccinated, and my family is fully vaccinated, and try to get as soon as we can because we want to kind of get things going. And I do believe it is the right of companies to determine whether or not they can allow people to come in who has been vaccinated, because they need employees. And we also need to make sure to encourage as much vaccination as possible. Understandably, yes, people will not vaccinate because of due to health reasons, or too young, or possibly due to religious reasons. And we can those of us who have no excuse for that should probably do our best to protect those people by getting fully vaccinated. We need to enforce and encourage to make as many people do so. So what can we do afterwards? Well, first of all, we can make sure that we have help small businesses by keeping the tax rate 9%. But also, what we can do is ensure that we don't have this problem again by having the guaranteed annual income in place, which will allow to ensure that no matter what, you will never suffer if you have to go into a situation in which you might be unemployed. As we've seen for the past few months, it can often happen that many of us find ourselves unemployed. With a guaranteed annual income, we can make sure that any one of us is not going to will not go into the poverty line. And then what will happen is that as you get above the guaranteed annual income, you will be taxed accordingly to fund it out. I also like to add that by making sure that we have affordable high-speed.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Vercouteren. Mr. Gelinas.
Thank you. My wife and I are both fully vaccinated, the 2 shots. I support passports. I believe everybody should get the shots. I know there's people that say it infringes on my rights. But a healthy country is a prosperous country. And the only way we're going to end this pandemic is by everyone getting the shots and getting rid of the viruses and the Delta virus and all the ones that mutate. So that's my position on that. What are we going to do? Well, you know, for recovery in this country and province and riding, we have to look out for the small businesses. 85% of the economy is driven by small business. 85%. So what we have to do is we have to get people back to work. But we have a problem. We have husbands and wives that have kids that have been off for the last year, 2 years, or whatever. And for them to get back to work, they got to feel safe that their children are going to be in a good health care, or pardon me, child care environment, so they don't have to worry about their children. So we propose to have better child care, and we propose to also, in the recovery, help small businesses. So that's the important thing. Make sure the kids have a good place to stay and a safe place to stay at $10 a day, and then let's get back to work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington.
All right, thank you very much. I feel like I'm painting the same wall for the fourth time here, but yes, I'm double vaxxed as well. My family's double vaxxed. I think my entire neighborhood is double vaxxed. It's one of the questions that we hear the most when we're door knocking, is people ask me, and I'm proud to say it, that yes, we're double vaxxed, and I think it's extremely important that we have vaccines. And the vaccine passport, although I know it divides people, it's important. We've got to take the pressure off our healthcare system. They are exhausted. They are stressed. The times that they have to put gear on, take gear off, we need to move forward, and the best way to do that is with vaccines. When it comes to opening up the province and opening up the country, we've got a great plan with the Liberal Party. We helped during COVID-19. 75% wage subsidy for small business was key. Also providing loans for you of up to $60,000 that only $40,000 of it had to be paid back. That helped many small business owners sleep at night. But we've got to keep moving forward. Mandatory vaccines on planes and trains only make sense. We need to support safer indoor spaces for our schools and businesses and better ventilation. Vaccines are extremely important. It's how we'll move forward out of the pandemic and into better days. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. I'm going to stick in the same general area here of the pandemic. And this time around, the question goes to you first, Mr. Vercouteren. The pandemic has shown the disadvantage to Canadians of relying on other countries to supply medical equipment and drugs, including vaccines. How will your party plan to boost medical research and investment in drug manufacturing in Canada?
Well, as you may have heard, is that the reason we ran into an issue because of the fact that we had a perfectly good program to develop vaccines that was closed a few decades ago and never reopened. That's the first thing we have to fix. Make sure we can actually start producing vaccines here. We're going to ensure that all our healthcare workers have actually adequate equipment and adequate drugs and plans to make so and the next time it happens, which probably won't be long, then we'll be prepared. We should focus on what we can to make things locally and affordably as possible. And they should focus on developing the programs and systems so we can be self-sustainable and not rely on the global economy. You know, I have to say that it is unfortunate that we have where we are right now. And with the climate issues and the climate disasters, there's a good possibility we're going to find ourselves in this again. So this is why we sought to focus on preparing an economy to deal with crisis. This is the way government should work. And that's why I truly believe that this is why we need to go forward with that type of position.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Gelinas.
Thank you again. We used to make our own drugs, vaccines here in Canada, but the Conservatives decided to sell it off to France a few years back. We should be making all our products. We shouldn't rely on other countries, especially in a time of pandemic. So we have to make sure that we get back to production and producing the items that we need, because this is going to come back again, hopefully not for another 100 and some years when we're all gone, but it's bound to happen. It's repetitive in history. We have to be prepared. We have to have a government that's going to stand up and save the people of Canada. Unfortunately, the last two governments didn't want to do anything about it. They didn't think of it. It was important. Well, it's time for us to put a change to that, and let's get someone in there that's going to get things done. Now, as far as healthcare is so important that, we have to have the opportunity to invest in our people. We've got to close loopholes that take place with people who make billions and billions of dollars and then put it in offshore accounts. We got to start taxing those people so that we have the money to put back into the country and back into people. Now, we are the people. We're the ones that pay the taxes all the time. But if the guys making the big money aren't paying the taxes, then we're just fighting a dead horse here. You got to stop and look at what's taken place in the last 20 years. And I think it's very important that we start closing loopholes and getting things done for us.
Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington.
Science and technology are the two key factors here. But the third part is encouraging our universities to step up and to allow education to move forward so that we can bring vaccines right here into our own country, made in our own country, that are worked on by our own people that are Canadian. We'll add 1,000 Canadian research chairs to help attract that so that we can retain that information right here in our country. We're going to establish a $75 million a year fund for colleges and universities so we can move forward and we can have a plan so that we can do the research ourselves. I don't want to hire outside of Canada. Nobody wanted to bring vaccines from outside of Canada, but boy, were we ever good at getting them here, considering we weren't making them. And Dan, I couldn't agree more. It was a conservative initiative that made us lose that opportunity to make vaccines in this country. So we've got to move forward, work together with our universities, and let's start working on that science right here in our own country so that we can produce those vaccines without going outside. And it starts at home, and it starts with our young adults producing jobs, giving them opportunities right here in our own colleges and our universities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. Mr. Epp.
This issue is so important. That's one of the 5 pillars that's part of Canada's recovery plan, this plan that was published on the first day of the campaign. Secure our country by creating a strategic stockpile of essential products and building the capacity to manufacture vaccines at home. As has been accused, Connaught Labs was sold. Their vaccine-producing technology was out of date. However, the criticism is valid that it was never restarted here in Canada, and that is something that we have committed to do. By unleashing Canadian innovation, first of all, the broad process, it will be done in consultation, not in an Ottawa knows best top-down approach. But some of the structures that we're considering will incentivize companies to develop their products here by cutting the income tax. We're going to get some specifics here. Cut the income tax in half for newly patented technologies that are developed here. We're going to establish the Canadian Advanced Research Agency that's going to be focused on technological advances, carbon capture, hydrogen fuel, electrical vehicles, and pharmaceutical research and production. Make it attractive to also invest in small tech startups, which is also a part of this, using the Canadian flow-through share mechanism that's so successful in our mining world. We're going to fix SHRED. That's the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program, by moving it from CRA over into Science, Innovation, and Development. Overall, across many subject matters, we've got to review our regulatory framework. We're outdated in our regulatory approach. Not get rid of it, but we can streamline it so that the innovation that's developed here stays here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Epp. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on. Another important issue that was brought to light during the pandemic was long-term care facilities and the importance of the roles of municipal, provincial, and federal governments in caring for our country's most vulnerable. Mr. Gelinas, you have the question first. How will you and your party improve living and working conditions in long-term care facilities and address the staffing crisis across Canada?
The NDP wants to have Taking Better Care of Each Other program. And by doing this, we have to restore the cuts the Liberals and the Conservatives made. They harm services almost to a point of collapse. So we believe that healthy people is a healthy country and all benefit. That's why we're introducing pharmacare again. We had pharmacare brought to a vote, as I said, and it was shot down by both the Liberals and the Conservatives, except for 2 Liberals. We have to fight poverty. We have to be able to access healthy foods. We have to support our farmers through infrastructure so they can actually get to their fields to produce the foods and get them to market to sell. We have to fix the opioid crisis, declare it a public health emergency. So there's so many things in healthcare, but we have to look at long-term care, and we have to change the way it is. These for-profit long-term care homes are literally killing people. People can't afford to move into the ones, and once they're in there, they're not being regulated. So for long-term care, we have to get rid of the for-profit long-term care homes, and we have to have the government step in and run these places so that we have our seniors, which I will be there one day, we have our seniors that can live in a healthy environment, enjoy their life.
Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington.
It was probably one of the biggest shocks for many of us that our long-term care facilities were just not maintained the way that they should. And government needed to step up and step in. And we need the Liberal government to do just the same, and we will. We'll put towards $9 billion to make our long-term care facilities stronger, better. But it starts with staff. Staff is the most important part with our long-term care facilities. We'll pay $25 an hour, up to, for personal support workers to work in those facilities so we get good quality care, and we're willing to step up to make sure that we do that. The Liberal government also realizes that doctors and nurses are extremely important in order that long-term care facilities are maintained. So we're going to hire 7,500 more doctors and nurses going forward. So these facilities are maintained and taken care of as they should be. Our seniors are so important to us. This country needs to recognize it, and our long-term care facilities need to continue. And we need to work on making sure they stay in this riding. Tilbury's got an issue right now of losing their long-term care facility. I will work strongly together with the executives, government, to make sure that we can keep our long-term care facilities that are operational now, and they're maintained right here in our riding of Chatham-Kent-Leamington. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. Mr. Epp.
With my wife, who's out there somewhere, and one of my daughters working in this field, this comes very close to me. Health is a provincial jurisdiction, with the federal government doing a lot of funding toward it. There are calls for national codes. That can be developed over time, but we've got to move a lot faster than that. So several points. First of all, we will invite provinces to sit down and work with us to get at a set of standard best practices. We recognize that the infrastructure is out of date, so we are committing $3 billion toward infrastructure. 3, not the 9, I can never, as a Conservative, outpromise a Liberal or an NDP government. So if you're looking for me to outpromise, forget it. Outdeliver, absolutely. Provinces have to take some lead here. We work in a confederation, and that has to be done in consultation. That is so often lacking in this present government. We would like to hire more people. We can't hire what isn't there. So what we can do, though, is prioritize the needs of personal support workers, doctors, nurses coming into this country through our immigration process. That can be done immediately to begin to address the shortage that we have in that field. Again, these are big problems. The pandemic, we know this in our own community, in congregate living settings, our bunkhouses here, our long-term care. We're most vulnerable there in the pandemic. We will address it.
Thank you, Mr. Epp. Mr. Vercouteren.
Well, first of all, we believe that we should put long-term care under the same health authority as it is with pretty much all other health system. And we also have a pharmacare program which involves buying bulk drugs in order to reduce the cost and make them affordable for everyone. It's also important to make sure we increase the number of nurses and help them by providing an increase in pay for them, ensure that they have paid sick leave, and be able to actually be able to handle the job. Add to that, we're actually going to help long-term care by allowing seniors to stay at home. At the home environment, they'll feel more comfortable, more secure, and be able to relax better. Health is, of course, the key issue, and while it's a provincial issue, it's an issue for all Canadians. And what the Green Party policy is to make sure that we're going to do whatever we can to make sure our health is possible. Because as you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And as we're all going to get older, we at least make sure that we are going to have a comfortable and long, safe life, and make sure that those who take care of us are not going to be overly stressed out and actually be able to handle the job adequately.
Thank you, Mr. Vercouteren. All right. 2021 also brought another new issue to the national spotlight. Let's talk about reconciliation. In this year of national reconciliation, there's an important dialogue Canadians must continue to have regarding the need for Indigenous knowledge and stewardship to develop action plans that include use of land as well as the truth behind the residential school system, treatment of Indigenous women. What actions will your government implement based on the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And Mr. Hetherington, the question is yours first.
Probably one of the biggest things that we need to focus on as Canadians right now, reconciliation. Since day one, we've been committed to working with the Indigenous people to build a nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship that's based on respect, partnership. We also need to recognize the rights. And we've made great progress with First Nations, but we're not done. There's much more that we can do. We'll commit to a wellness strategy with First Nations, expanding our recent commitment to $2 billion over 5 years. We understand that this work will take time, and it will need to be guided by the communities, the survivors, and the families that were involved. We also need to put forward a mental health program to assist the families that have been affected, the children that have heard the stories on TV or read them online. Mental health is a key initiative that we'll step forward and put money towards. We'll continue rebuilding. We'll continue to advance the priorities of the Indigenous communities to reclaim full jurisdictions in the matters that when it comes to children and family services, education, health care, policing, also administrations of justice. Further support will also help the First Ministry's meeting on a First Nations priorities once we get back to government. We need to focus on the Indigenous community. It's priority number one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hetherington. Mr. Epp.
About 2 months ago, my wife and I were able to take a safe trip to Kamloops. Our daughter, who works in long-term care, oversees 5 homes there, and gave us our first grandchild about 1.5 years ago. We took the opportunity also to visit with the Kamloops Residential School and speak to local elders there. It was heartening to see them reaching out, taking care of the folks that were destroyed, where the fire destroyed their homes in Lytton. But giving gestures and showing gestures is not enough, not nearly enough. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was commissioned by the Conservative government, and it published its results in 2015, 95 calls for action. 6 years of this present government, some of the recommendations were cherry-picked, but an awful lot of the hard work has been left undone. We have to acknowledge the sorrow and mourning that the survivors are presently experiencing. The discovery of the graves, first in Kamloops, and then Saskatchewan, BC, that's brought it all home for all of us. We have to get that into our education system so we learn and never forget. But more importantly, we do need action more than symbols. So we support a swift timeline and immediate funding to deliver on the calls, action number 71 to 76, that deals with the missing children, providing healing. It goes without saying we support treaty rights. The Liberals created a national holiday that will not provide First Nations people with drinking water, will not provide economic opportunities, will not help businesses, Indigenous business, or end human trafficking rings, or supply mental health support.
Thank you.
We need action.
Thank you very much, Mr. Epp. Mr. Vercouteren.
As you can imagine, the Green Party, we support implementing the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, plus the calls to action from the acquiring the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Also, I'd like to add that one of the things we're going to do is we're going to put in mental health as part of the health curriculum. And of course, that we're going to expand that into include provide mental health facilities for Indigenous dealing with the problems of residential school. We're going to actually do this by combining with the traditional and healing practices. Also, it's time to start moving away from the Indian Act, which is what it's called, and allowing them to grow into more of a self-governing structure. And we're going to start helping to do that. Also, it's time to provide education for us, the not Indigenous, as to this history and the land and what we've been doing, what was here before, and what we're doing to them now. It seems that when I learned history in school, it seemed to start when the French came. But we know that's not true, is it? That there were people here before that, which is what we in history in every country. It is time for us to do what I've been told we need to do. Start treating them like adults. They are human beings just like you, me, and everybody else. And we don't treat them like people who have been issues. We're treating them like people we've mistreated and have a reason to mistrust us, and start trying to actually treat them like they are adults.
Thank you, Mr. Vercouteren. Mr. Gelinas.
Truth and reconciliation has not been around since day one. The Conservatives and Liberals have turned their back on the Indigenous people throughout the years. We all know that. We know our history. If they had been there for the Indigenous people, you would have clean water. You wouldn't have to wait 16 years to have the water fixed. There's many nations right now that do not have access to clean water. We have to recognize the Indigenous rights, and their rights and their culture. We have to understand that. And how do we do that? We don't walk in and say to them, here's the way it's going to be, guys. No, we sit down with all the nations. We sit down and we come to a conclusion where everyone is happy. This is something that's very important to the Indigenous people. They want to be able to run their own lives. They need safe access to health medications. They need good housing. I think it's 1 out of 3 Indigenous child lives in poverty and poor housing. We have to introduce better housing and affordable housing. We have to end racism, and that's been continuous for hundreds of years. And we have to honor our Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Let's move on. I'd now like to discuss agriculture and the environment. So, Mr. Epp, the first question goes to you once again. By 2030, the monetary costs associated with carbon and fuel taxation on farm owners and operators will make it even more difficult for families to generate a sustainable income. As farm operating margins narrow due to these increased costs currently set to be implemented, how will your government assist these essential workers in offsetting those costs?
First of all, as a Conservative party, we have introduced a very serious plan combat climate change and to meet our Paris Accord, our Paris targets. Let me just state as a broad statement right off the bat, in the Ag Committee, the AAFC agricultural officials testified to us that agriculture collectively has kept their GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, steady since 2008. That's unlike almost every other sector of our economy. They've remained steady as we've maintained input. But that's whereby farmers have been adopting all sorts of innovative practices without the stick of a carbon tax. We have introduced a price on carbon for the consumers everywhere, and every farmer and ag person will also be paying that in their personal capacity. But when it comes to addressing the business side of it, we will move together in applying a price to carbon with our trading partners and our trading competitors, namely the US and the EU, which are our main movements when it comes to agricultural products. As they apply carbon, we will as well. So we will maintain the exemption on farm fuels, on the fuel and gasoline. Unfortunately, Bill C-206 on drying fuels did not pass through the Senate. That will be addressed. The exemptions for business will need to remain and be addressed in international negotiations in lockstep. Otherwise, we're tying the hands of our farm community behind their backs. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mr. Epp. Mr. Vercouteren.
The Green Party is developing a policy called the Carbon Border Adjustment. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our companies are protected from companies from other countries who don't have the same carbon tax that we do in ours. So we're going to make sure that we're going to protect them from that, so that we can actually deal and this will enforce the fact that we're going to have to get those other countries to start getting into the carbon tax in order to actually help deal with the problems that we're having with the environment today. Also, we're going to help farmers transition from the present system to the no-till and carbon absorbing process that's available. And we just need to actually help them and provide the funds to them so we can actually turn the land into a carbon absorber, not a carbon taker. And as you can imagine, the Green Party, we also want to have several policies that are going to help with transition from gasoline to electric, and by providing more charging stations, we have more encouragement. In fact, what we also plan to do is provide more taxes on gasoline engines, and so that we, and reduce taxes on electronic. The more we can transition to renewable job-creating energy, the better we can actually deal with the climate issue and be able to help deal with the Paris Accord.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vercouteren. Mr. Gelinas.
To have a successful agricultural system, you need infrastructure. You need the roads, the bridges. You need all the stuff that's required, high-speed internet, to help the farmers get their plants planted and their products to market. You know, we have to understand that to be successful, they have to have the proper incentives. They have to be given the opportunity by our government by way of financial assistance. So it's really important. And it mixes in also with the environment. There's, complaints right now about trees and should trees be there, not be there, and there's a problem there. But climate change is very important. Climate change is the number one issue from Angus Reid. That was number one issue that voters were basing their vote on. And it's very important. You have the liberals that say, yeah, we're there, but they turn around and give $2 billion a year to the oil industries, the gas industries. So really, they're in, they have Trudeau in their back pocket. So we got to look at all these little things that are taking place. And as far as our conservative brothers here, they came out with an idea that we're going to help, we're going to give you money that you can buy green products with it. But to get this money, you have to go out and buy more fossil fuels. Now, to me, that doesn't make sense. Why would you encourage the use of fossil fuels? We have to go to renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington.
Climate change is one thing the Liberal Party has been behind for many years and will continue to do so. Record high water levels that we get from 10-inch rains that we haven't seen before. Climate change has made us all realize how important it is. We have close to 2,500 acres of farmland close by here that could be affected by a dike if we had issues with that going forward. When I talk to farmers about climate change and they understand that the Conservative Party doesn't believe in it, they get concerned, and they should be. Considering that 54% of the delegates from the Conservative Party voted against supporting climate change is real, how do our agriculturalists expect the Conservative Party to take care of climate going forward? When we talk about climate change, we need to put climate risk into business risk management for our farmers. That's key. The Liberal Party will do just that. But there's other issues we're dealing with. Labor shortages for our agriculturalists out there. We need to help with international workers on a regular basis. The processing capacity is a challenge right now as well. We need to step up there. The grocery code of conduct, considering 80% of our grocery sales are done with 5 companies. All key things we need to understand as consumers and assisting our agriculturalists at the same time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hetherington. Our next question stays in the same realm and is specific to climate change. Voters are concerned about climate change's effects on our future, but also about economic and occupational stability. Mr. Vercouteren, the first question goes to you. If elected, how would your party strike a balance between mitigating climate disaster and supporting Canadians who do rely on unsustainable industries?
In other words, carbon fuels, which is a dying industry. I've been studying for the past few years, and you want to know why the gas industry has been such a problem in Canada? It's simply because the U.S. isn't buying it anymore. It is dead. It's just pretty much just seen as going away. It's not going to come back. And the fact of the matter is that the gas industry is not the job creator. It's the renewable energy creator. So providing funds to transition people from our carbon fuel to renewable energy, we actually create jobs, not support a dying industry, which we are continuing to fund. So by stopping the funding of the gas industry, and we're moving that money into renewable energy, we're actually going to increase the economy and create jobs and make a more stable economy. Like I said, pretty much the gas industry is suffering is because of the fact is that product is not good. That's the fact. It's expensive, it's dirty, and people don't want it. That's why we're not selling it. So why don't we transition away from it into renewable energy, which has constantly proven to be the job creator? The fact of the matter is that we can do so. And by moving away and building, and we can also move towards energy, we can actually provide increased funding to public transportation with more affordable high-speed internet, allowing people to work from homes. We can easily move away from this job killer.
Thank you, Mr. Vercouteren. Mr. Gelinas.
Well, we just have to turn TV on or step outside. Take a look at what's happening to this world. We've got all kinds of bad weather, tornadoes, hurricanes. It's continuous. And there's a reason for that, and it's called climate change. Some people don't want to recognize it because it's going to cost their rich buddies a bit of money to help correct it. And other people just turn their back and walk away on it. The NDP wants to meet the targets set by scientists of lowering the temperature by 1.5 degrees. You know, we've never met our goals here in Canada with the Paris Agreement. We've never, created an environment that would lower the temperature and would create a better climate environment for us. And we always hear these promises, but nothing ever gets done. I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired of hearing promises, especially about something that's so important as climate change. You know, if farmers can't build or grow their products because of rains and storms and tornadoes, then we're all going to suffer. We're all going to lose our chance to have the good, healthy foods that we need. So I think we have to look at renewable energy. We have to make sure that we invest in automobiles and we invest in renewable energy. Simple as that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington.
The two key words we need to remember are energy transition. Those are key. I had a great meeting with Enbridge, and we talked about energy transition. We talked about Line 5 and the importance of Line 5. We just can't cut cold turkey to become a greener, more prosperous country. We've got to do it slowly. And energy transition is the way we do that. And after the conversation with Enbridge, their commitment to start more solar fields, they built the biggest one in the world. More wind energy assists our farmers. They get some added income, and we get better, cleaner energy. The Liberal Party has made a commitment for a cleaner, greener future. Steps we've made like ending plastic waste by 2030. We see it in our lakes. We see it in our rivers. Let's end it by 2030. Let's cut pollution in heavy industry and make sure oil and the gas sector is net zero by 2050. Let's move forward. But we can also benefit from being greener. Think of the extra jobs it can create. Green jobs, better jobs, great jobs to attract our university young students to stay in Leamington and Wheatley and Comber and all the areas around us. We do need a cleaner, greener future, and it's doable with the Liberal Party's plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. Mr. Epp.
As I stated earlier, the Conservative Party has a serious plan, and it is a bit of a switch from our previous approach to climate. We are proposing a price on carbon. Our plan has been independently analyzed by Navius Research. That's the same organization that evaluated the Liberal plan, determined ours to be equal in meeting our Paris Accords, but ours superior in spurring the economy. And here's how. The carbon levy is not a carbon tax that goes to Ottawa to be spent or not. It goes into your own carbon savings, low carbon savings account. As to the criticism that will drive more fossil fuel use to collect your points, or however you want to put it, reminds me of the Pharaoh when he said, "Thou shalt make more bricks with less straw," or no straw. The reality is, for so many areas of our economy right now, there aren't the alternatives. Those alternatives need to be developed, need to be researched. We're committing $5 billion toward more zero-emission vehicles, both EV and hydrogen. We're putting more investments into ag and forestry, $3 billion for incentivizing more, adopting techniques to lower or increase our sequestration and lower our emissions. As I said before, ag has held their emissions steady. We know we need to do a little bit better. The Liberals are excellent, phenomenal at promises. In fact, in 2019, they promised 2 billion trees to address climate change. Guess how many have been planted? I'm waiting for today's promise again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Epp. And we move on now to our next question and our next category. It's the national debt. We're going to start with you, Mr. Gelinas. How does your party plan to deal with and pay down the federal debt?
We feel that we have to make sure the economy for Canadians, jobs for Canadians, health care for Canadians, housing are there before you can even think about balancing budgets. Now, we're the only party provincially that has balanced budgets in the 4 provinces we've held power in. You know, not 100%, I think we're about 85% we balanced the budget. But you can't balance a budget until you get your country healthy. So therefore, you have to invest in health care, farmer care, you have to invest in housing, you have to invest in all the necessities, infrastructure, all the necessities to get the economy growing again. Once the economy is leveled off and people are starting to make a good wage and all have jobs, then you look at balancing the budget. But you can't balance the budget until you're healthy. So that's what we plan on doing. We've implemented programs. You've all seen them. We want to get these programs going. We want to help the ordinary Canadian. You know, the person who's worked all their lives, has been out of work for 2 years. You know, the husband and wife team that go to work every day but worry about their child. So you get childcare, proper childcare for the families. They're more productive. The economy will grow. Believe me, we'll be back. It's just a matter of getting there. And once we're there, let's look at the balance in the budget.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Mr. Hetherington.
Getting people back to work is step one, and it's maybe the small business side of me coming out, but once they get back to work, they start paying more taxes, and that helps us get out of the issues that we're dealing with. And certainly, the Liberal Party spent a lot of money over the last year. There are times to save, and there are times to spend. And I'm thankful that the Liberal Party spent when they did. We helped families, we helped small business, and we had to spend money. But going forward, we can start paying back some of that debt. Things like $10 childcare, $10 a day childcare will help get people back to work. Right now, we have people that can't afford to go to work because they can't get affordable childcare. $10 a day childcare changes that. It gets people back to work. We're also going to help businesses. We're going to move forward with research. Research in this country can help us get jobs, and a lot of jobs. We're also going to penalize some of those that have benefited through the pandemic. Not everybody lost money. Big business made money, like banks. We're going to penalize banks 3%. So once they make $1 billion or more, we penalize them 3% because they're doing okay and they can pay their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. Mr. Epp.
Who do you trust to restore our economy? In 1971, Justin Trudeau was born. If his father had a fiscal plan like the budget that was just announced, today, in 2021, we would be approaching budget balance. 50 years. Right now, the Pleasant Plan approaches budget balance in 2070. So think back to Pierre when he was in power, the mess that it led to in the early 80s. Numbers. This is an area I unfortunately perversely enjoy with the economic situation we have. Pre-pandemic, our Canadian growth rate was 1.6% of GDP. That was coupled still with $20 to $30 billion annual deficits. The road to recovery is we need to get our growth rates up over 3%. Otherwise, we are looking at hiked taxes and/or slashed services. We have to get a different philosophy. We have to get people back to work as opposed to paying people to stay home. And yes, we had to support people during the pandemic, and Conservatives agreed with that. But let's take a look at some more numbers. On an average year, Canadians save between $20 and $22 billion a year. Sounds like a big number, but at 38 million people, it's about $600 a year, so it intuitively makes some sense. In the last fiscal year, Canadians saved over $200 billion. That's how much liquidity was poured into our economy. That's what's driving the inflation you're seeing now. We had a deficit of $388 billion. The Bank of Canada printed $354 billion. So the inflation you're experiencing at the grocery store, at the lumber yard, is very, very real. We've got to drive the economy through stimulus and get people working.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Epp and Mr. Vercouteren.
As I said, small businesses, we're going to keep the taxes at 9% because the small businesses are the job creators. However, the big businesses and the rich are not the job creators they are called. The fact of the matter is that they have a lot of dead money that should be used in order to help Canadians. That's why we believe it's time to raise the taxes on the rich and the big business. First of all, let's raise the big tax on the big corporations from 15% to the 21% they have in the U.S. And it's time to close the offshore and all the tax loopholes, causing all that dead money to just be used sitting around and used to actually help the average Canadians. And it's time to actually look at those big international corporations that seem to come in and operate tax-free, like Google and Facebook, and make sure that they can, if they're going to operate in Canada, they will have to pay their fair share. And if you're going to advertise on those platforms, you should also pay your fair share of taxes, thus protecting our local media business. And we should also have more of a tax on luxury goods, like planes and other items. The fact of the matter is that income inequality, as I believe, is one of the biggest problems and the biggest job-killing factors. And it's time to actually make things more in the balance, and it's time to actually fix the tax system that hasn't been fixed since 1960.
Very good. And thank you, Mr. Vercouteren. I see we have time for one last question, and we'll start with you, Mr. Hetherington. We want to talk about personal expectations. Canadians don't want adversarial politics and believe that we would be better off with a government if our elected officials worked in a more cooperative way to build better public policy and a more transparent government. So please comment on what we can expect from you in performing your duties as an elected representative.
Involvement. You'll see me everywhere. I like to get involved. I like sweat equity. I like to get my hands dirty, whether it's wearing some boots in a field or dress shoes in a meeting. I want to get involved with you. I had a great conversation with Mike Diab a couple weeks ago, and we talked about homelessness and how we could fix the homelessness problem. It's a huge issue in our riding. So what do? We get involved. We step up, understand what people are dealing with. So it's why I've made a commitment, together with my wife, that after the election is over, we're going to get involved and help the bridge. That's the Leamington Youth Resource Center here. And we want to get involved and help raise money. I think there's an opportunity for me to find private dollars together with public dollars. A lot of the times people are asking for handouts or hand-ups. I think I can help with the private sector generating income together with public dollars to make a huge change right here in Leamington, Wheatley, Chatham, Tilbury, and all the communities in between. But it takes involvement. We need someone to step up and look into the issues and get involved. Get your hands dirty. It can change everything. And that's what you'll see from me. You'll see me in your backyard. You've seen me on your doorstep knocking on the 7,000 doors we've seen over the 5 weeks. You'll see me everywhere, and that's what an MP should do.
Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. Mr. Epp.
We are inheritors of the Westminster parliamentary system. 155 years of it, if I've done my math very quickly correctly. That means the job of Her Majesty's loyal opposition is to oppose, not in a malicious manner, but to oppose and critique to make better legislation. That's something that Justin Trudeau has not liked. That's why we're in an election. He does not like the parliamentary process. There's a place for that improves legislation that serves Canadians. When it comes to working regionally and locally, it was a great opportunity. Unfortunately, it was in a pandemic when it went through our temporary foreign worker community and into our communities, but to chair a task force that involved the Liberal member from Windsor, the NDP member from Windsor, my Conservative colleague here, so all of Essex County with our healthcare providers. We work collaboratively at issues that affect the local region. Inside of Parliament, one needs the credibility of one's peers to work on that team. That's how our system, our Canadian system works. Doesn't matter what your local reputation is. You have to have credibility with your team, and it would help to stay with your team for more than a year or so.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Epp. Mr. Vercouteren.
One of the platforms is that we're going to actually develop environmental policy. This is actually not going to just be on our part. We're going to work together with all other parties to make sure it works for all Canadians. Add to that, we believe it is necessary to have an open government to allow those things to be out in the open that we feel that has to be protected, and so we can avoid the scandal like the SNL scandal that we had a few years ago. After that, we're going to make sure that Canadians' privacy is protected from the government. But more than anything else, it's time to do what Justin Trudeau promised in 2015, and that is end first, past the post. The reason we're actually in an election is simply because of the fact that Trudeau looked at the numbers and thought, hey, I can win the majority, and turned out to be wrong. Isn't it time to actually make sure that we have a parliament that actually reflects the will of the Canadians, show the percentage of MPs does show what percentage voted for? The fact of the matter is that our present system means that we're going to actually, it's a good possibility that even though Trudeau may actually have less, actually get less votes than the Conservatives, he's going to actually be in form of government. And let's face it, it really is time to fix the system. We can avoid what we're doing right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vercouteren. Mr. Gelinas.
Thank you. Every one of us up here sitting at the podium want to represent each and every one of you the best we possibly can. I don't care if you're Conservative, Liberal, or Green Party, or an NDP. We're here for a reason. We believe in our community, we believe in Chatham, Kent, Leamington, and we believe that we, as individuals, can make it better for everybody. My personal involvement would be, I've talked about this before, is I want to form a 4-person committee where we'll meet, with doctors and nurses, we'll meet with greenhouse workers and owners, we'll meet with farmers, we'll meet with small businesses and ask them very simply, what are your concerns and what can we do to help you? When you sit down and talk to people, tete-a-tete, what happens is you get to understand the person and you get to understand the company that they're working with. And that's how you get things solved. You can't just make promises and say, hey, I'm going off to Ottawa and I'm going to do something. But when you have a committee working together and you're given direction, by the Indigenous people or what they need or by anyone in this riding, then that's what we're working for. And believe me, we're all the same here. We all feel that, we live here, we love this area, and we want to make it better. Because if you win, we win. Bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Thank you very much. And that'll conclude our question and answer period. We'll now move into the closing remarks section of the evening. These are prepared remarks. There are no rebuttals to them. Each candidate has a minute and a half. That's 90 seconds each. And again, the same as the question and answer period, we'll show the yellow card at 15 seconds to go and a red card for the stop. And we'll go in the same order that we started. So closing remarks, Dave Epp, the floor is yours.
This election is an unnecessary one, but nevertheless, Justin Trudeau wants you to make a choice, so please make it. As I said in my opening remarks, there's so many local issues that I'd sooner be taking back to Ottawa rather than fighting this election. Some are centered in the ag industry, and now having some national profile in this file will certainly help going forward. For all of us, the rising cost of everything, inflation, as it spreads through our economy, both locally and nationally, will need to be addressed. Canada's Conservatives are the only alternative to secure the future, to restore competence, transparency, and accountability to government, and to ensure that Canada is never unprepared for a crisis again. With the Conservatives, you will get Canada's recovery plan to secure jobs, health, and Canada's economic future. We will secure your jobs, the 1 million that were lost during the pandemic in 1 year. Secure accountability. We haven't even talked about that tonight by enacting a new anti-corruption law to clean up the mess in Ottawa. Secure mental health. We haven't spent as much time as we should on the silent pandemic through a Canada Mental Health Action Plan. Secure our country, as we said before, through a strategic stockpile of essential products, and secure Canada's economy by balancing our books within a decade. We'll focus relentlessly on jobs and wages, getting Canada's economy back on track. Who do you trust to get us back? We led the G7 coming out of the global recession. We can do it again.
Mark Vercouteren, the floor is yours.
I'd like to start off by getting a lot of emails from a website called Vote Housing, and I believe it's a very important issue with a lot of Canadians and a lot of people in our riding. Unfortunately, they make it so that you can't respond to those emails. So if I want to say that, first of all, if you want to hear my response to that issue, just go to look for the candidates for the Green Party, look for my name, get my email address, and it'll tell you what it is that I was trying to tell you, but I couldn't try to reach you. I also like to add that, as I've been saying, we've been moving more towards a green economy, and I think we can actually make the steps to move further. By making sure that there's no monopolies on the internet, and by ensuring that there's affordable high-speed internet, we can actually help for everyone to actually do what we all probably been enjoying for the past few months, working at home. Because that, I believe, is where the future is going to lie. The fact of the matter is that we're going to see more automation, and we're going to see less jobs in the manufacturing center due to that. What we're likely going to see is more jobs that are going to be done at home, which is why we need to make sure that we have, as I said, affordable high-speed internet. And by make sure we can move at home, we have this commuting, and actually be able to move more away from the gas-fueled vehicles towards electric vehicles. And you can also perhaps even move away from vehicles and have more public transportation. One of the many steps that we have that can move away from our carbon economy to a renewable energy green economy and deal with the climate crisis we're dealing with right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vercouteren. Dan Gelinas, the floor is yours.
There's a lot at stake this election. We need childcare. We need climate crisis cleaned up. We need pandemic recovery. We need pharmacare and mental health. Andrea Horvath, our leader here in Ontario for the NDP, she has promised that she's pledged that she would create a Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction. These are things that are so important. Again, it's been brought up, who do you trust? We've had the Liberals, we all remember what's happened the last 5-6 years, and we all remember the Harper days. Do we want to go back to that? I don't think so. I don't want to. I want to be able to put new blood into Ottawa that's going to think about the average person sitting in this room. There's so many things that we need, but we never get anything done by the Conservatives or the Liberals. So I'm saying to you, it's time for a change. It's time to give the NDP a chance to rule. We've done it in 4 provinces. Provincially, we've done well in 4 provinces. Now, nobody agrees with everything that's ever done. I mean, that's why we have the Conservatives against the Liberals and the Liberals against the NDP. And most of us saying, hey, Green's nice, but the bottom line is it's not working. So stop and think of what's really happened here. In the last 20 years. We've not been progressive enough here in Chatham-Kent, Leamington. We have to get a little more progressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gelinas. Greg Hetherington, the floor is yours.
Dan, I'm not against you. I just want to beat you. That's all. This election is important. It's not a popularity contest. This is a hard-working contest. We need a representative that'll show up, listen, and work for you. We need a voice that's passionate about agriculture, can help bring forward opportunities in the ag sector and tie them together with small business so that we can all benefit with jobs and growing the local economy and keep Chatham-Kent-Leamington safe while moving forward. We need to continue to support the vaccine. It helps us move forward. We need to support climate change with action, not just words. Support families to get ahead with $10 a day childcare, a plan that works and saves families money. We need to help seniors stay in their homes. And those that can't, we need to make sure they have quality care that they deserve in our long-term care facilities. But most important, give you choices. We need to address our housing issue, help young families get a home, and help others find an apartment that they can afford. This election is local. It's not about policy. It's not about Ottawa. It's about your local representative and which one is going to step up and show up when a time of need comes forward. I want to be that member of parliament for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hetherington. Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to thank each one of you, Dave Epp, Mark Vercouteren, Dan Gelinas, and Greg Hetherington. Thank you for the courage of your convictions in standing for public office, and thank you for sharing your views with us tonight. Thank you all, gentlemen. Thank you once again, Wendy Parsons and the Leamington District Chamber of Commerce for organizing this, to the great volunteer staff at the Bank Theatre. Thank you for having us in this beautiful theatre tonight. We appreciate all the work you did tonight. Folks, I talked about what the job of the moderator was at the beginning, and now it's time to talk about your job. Take what you've heard, think about it, talk about it, and then vote. And more importantly, bring somebody with you to vote. Get the vote out. That is one of our greatest rights in this country. So thank you for joining us tonight.